I know you've never.
I have not switched it yet.
I know you've never seen the movie Wayne's World. Were you? So in the movie, when they're doing the TV show, they're learning how to do the TV show or whatever, and the guy's counting them down. He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna say, in 5, 4." And they're like, "Okay." So the first time they do it, he shows them with the camera, and he's like, "In 5, 4." They show him with the camera, like. So, pull that back a little bit. Hi, Janet. Good to see you. Man, I'm distracted this morning. No, I was back there just reading stuff, and just all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, class is starting." My bad. So, I know. Usually I'm like, I'm going to start the stream even though no one's in the room with me.
It was deep theological content, though, that you're about to just.
Yeah, that's what it was.
When I walked in and you and Brandon were in here and everybody was already in, I thought, what's happening?
What is this?
Yeah.
I just noticed it. I had been in the auditorium looking for Sherry's Bible.
Did you find it?
If anybody finds a King James
It's got a
Bible,
cover that Joyce made, so it's got a real pretty cloth cover that Joyce made.
Missing since Sunday or before that?
No, because I was bringing
Okay.
it because it's King James Version.
Yeah.
And then I quit bringing it because I started using my phone more,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember.
Okay, we can look for it.
Yeah. and-
There's places to look, but
And the reason I want it, I've got the obituary thing of my husband.
oh yeah, definitely want that. Sure.
Yeah, her.
In the what? In the check-in area? Yeah. We looked over there already, or she and Brandon looked over there. So yes, yeah, she did. It was in the stack of stuff right beside the nightstand next to the bed. She forgot she had a whole bunch of stuff when she was coming in. So, are you staying back there today? Okay, that's fine. No, that's fine. I'm going to turn this a little more this way then, since we're not having to share it. Yes. All right. I just didn't remember. So, okay, everybody have a good Halloween? Yeah? We don't have Sharon here to regale us the stories of scaring her grandchildren with the haunted house. So,
Sharon is not having a good day. She texted me this morning.
okay. That's all we need to know, is that she's just not having a good
I
day.
think she told me so I would, because she's mentioned the ladies' class, but she said she has a friend that was diagnosed with cancer and isn't expected to be with them long. And her great-grandson, they put him in a coma because
Oh,
he
wow.
has RSV and he's in Children's in Missouri.
Okay.
Oh,
So
wow.
she's having a bad day. She texted me just like at 9:30.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that's good to know.
This doesn't make sense, but
Okay. She's struggling.
vet needs.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay, back on a lighter note. How is, I know, Paulette, I know that Halloween's a big deal for your house.
Jenny dressed up as a dead bride.
As a dead bride?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
amazing. She had skeleton leggings and a skeleton long sleeve shirt, and then
Yeah.
she put on this black and white tutu, and she carried her bouquet from because she just got married.
Yeah, just got married, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so she was a dead bride, and Christian she tried to get him to dress up, but
wasn't a
He didn't buy in.
successful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she took her around, and she actually, some people actually asked her if she was trick or treating. You said you had some older. She was like, no, I'm just bringing my niece.
Yeah.
I'm just having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I dressed as an angel.
Oh, good.
That fits. That fits.
But my halo kept standing straight up in the air.
So that it looked more like horns, maybe? Or
I mean, it wouldn't go, you know how it's supposed to be.
maybe that was God intended.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I think something was kind of pushing out.
How funny. We didn't, we just set up a table in our driveway that looked pretty similar to our trunk for trunk or treat. So we just had Razorback stuff and people came by. But the guy across the street from us, I told y'all, one neighbor across the street had built some kind of tunnel for the kids to walk through. And I think it was just scary music and, you know, it wasn't too bad. I didn't actually go through it because I still don't know the guy's name. That feels awkward walking over going, hey, I know we've lived across the street from each other for a year now, but I don't know you. But I did meet our next door neighbors last night, and they were like, how long y'all been here? How many months? We're like, we've been here a year. Like, oh, well, nice to meet you. Because they haven't come over and met us either. So, you know, it's kind of, it was kind of awkward.
I need to have a neighborhood
Yeah.
party. Meet
They have
everybody.
neighborhood parties. We just don't go. Anyway, that's beside the point.
Reach out, connect.
I know. That whole mission ends at my neighborhood. Like as soon as I drive through, that's the force field where it doesn't. Anyway, but the other neighbor across the street, he hooked up like, well, just long story short, he had a big PVC pipe, and he hooked up kind of an air source to it, and so he had put tape down and mark an X on his driveway, and then he just tell the kids like X marks the spot, and they stand there, and he would put candy in this tube and hit the switch, and it would shoot candy in the air, and then they try to catch in their bags and stuff. It was pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would have
There's some
never thought to
really
do something like that.
Decorated yards this year too.
Yeah?
More than normal over in our part of town. There was one family went all out. They built a campfire with those orange lights, like Christmas lights, the little ones. Then made so it looked like a campfire. And then they had two skeletons roasting marshmallows over the campfire.
How funny.
One of them was a woman and one of them was a man, according to the hats they were wearing. Then they had the dog, and the dog had treed a squirrel or something that were all skeletons up the trees.
How funny.
I mean, they had just gone all that.
Yeah.
But there's a house in Dahlia's neighborhood that is ridiculous.
It's
I-
got
I bet there's
1,000.
I bet there's not a foot between any two things.
And it's all Halloween related
It's
stuff?
all Halloween people. It's all except the hearse. The hearse is not a person.
Yeah.
But I think the rest of it's all people. There's one where there's two of these creatures, and they've got a baby doll between them, and they're pulling it.
Oh,
And I
my
was
goodness.
Like, that's just disgusting. And I mean, it's not funny.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be
It's like
funny.
creepy.
Think like your typical neighborhood, and you've got like definitive lines between. It's like they have a fence that is a definitive line, and it's filled. Like there's
You couldn't
not
put-
any grass.
Yeah.
That you can see.
And it's
It's
all
crazy.
Halloween related stuff.
It's kind of like spooky. It's kind of like,
I don't like it.
yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah.
I think it's too much. They went overboard. If they'd had a few of those things in the yard, maybe.
That one.
Clowns,
But it's not.
Yeah.
you know, all kinds of stuff. All kinds.
Yeah, I like
Every
that.
creepy movie or show you've ever seen just about is represented in that yard.
Oh, the one over by me is all nice, funny stuff. It's not.
No, this one is not funny.
We had probably an even split of little kids and like teenagers, which I don't care. If you're going to, at least if you're a teenager, at least make the effort to dress up.
Yeah.
Fine. If you went to the effort, you know, we'll give you something. Okay. There's one kid that just walked up in a hoodie and shorts, man. He's, you know, probably 15 or something like that. And he just came walking up. Didn't say trick or treat, or he might have said trick or treat. But anyway, Ethan just hands us something. He just puts it in his pocket and keeps walking. I'm like, he didn't even try, man. Like I guess it's an orange sweatshirt, so maybe that counted.
Maybe
But
that's what it was.
anyway.
But Lindsay,
Yeah. Yeah. How little effort can I put into it?
but Lindsay pointed out to me last night, because she had some teenagers at her house,
Hmm.
that at least they weren't out doing damage to other
Mhm.
people's houses, and they weren't at some party getting high or getting drunk.
Yeah.
They were trick or treating.
Well, that was later on at night.
That's what I thought
Yeah,
too.
the party came later.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought too.
We're
but-
just getting candy now while it's
Remember,
dusk.
She doesn't have children yet. So
That's
let's
true.
let her remain in her little paradise. Of
How
peace.
funny.
they're just
Yeah.
teenagers.
All kids are innocent. Right, Brandon? All teenagers, they never do anything. I mean, really, I don't even know why you have a job, because, I mean,
They're all angels anyway.
yeah.
But they wouldn't be if you left, right?
That's it. It's all Brandon's influence, is what it is.
I got more comments on the shirt I wore to ours. In my own defense, I was left unsupervised.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great outfit.
Yeah, I thought
Yep.
it was. And I
Yep.
wore candy corn on my head.
Yep.
Lit up.
Yep. And we found that candy corn is both one of the most massively produced Halloween candies and yet also one of the most hated. So go figure. I don't know. Okay, so we're starting a new study today, and you guys, the consensus was to spend a a few weeks or several weeks talking about the minor prophets. Brandon's already laughed when I said the word a few weeks. So,
We can expect to finish
but
this
I will
by
say that
June.
There's 12 minor prophets.
there are 12 minor
So that'll be
prophets.
12 months, so maybe this
Yeah.
time next year?
Yeah, one minor prophet per month. No, we actually now whether we stick to it or not is yet to be seen. But we have a schedule. We've scheduled out so it's like end of February. Taking into account we're going to probably not meet the week of Thanksgiving, and then the week kind of like before Christmas until we get past New Year's. So taking those few weeks out, we have it on schedule to be done by the end of February. Whether that's the reality or not, we'll see.
Kind of like our
Um,
summer study of heaven and hell and
That
angels and demons?
yeah,
It was the
that
summer-
went into
November.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
we were going to go until the end of the year.
I did too. I was
yeah.
like,
Brandon would have too,
okay.
because you love talking about that stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Did no one tell Monty what we had been studying in here? Because the new Sunday school lessons,
I don't think so.
somebody should have, because some
Yeah.
people go, like.
Or maybe you're just going to get somebody else's opinion on everything.
I don't think I can take another.
There's 2 classes starting this coming Sunday, I think. Dillion's teaching one on heaven and hell, and then I forget what the other one is, but there's another one too.
Something to do with marriage.
Is
It's
it?
about
No, it's about
kids.
kids.
Kids, okay.
I don't know.
It's about how to handle kids and approach holidays.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, please.
I have no idea.
Obviously, by somebody
It was
who doesn't-
that was a brand new announcement to me, so I was
It was Sunday.
I was greedy.
going to say
I was greedy.
I believe you.
Yeah, but it was at the end of service.
I believe you.
It was at the end of service at the elders, when the
Do you
elders.
leave early to
I'm
go?
only
Send people off.
I was only hesitant because of a conversation I had with your daughter Sunday night. Okay, about your husband and how he tends to rest his eyes sometimes during the sermon. Really, really deep introspection. Yeah, while he's yeah. But it was her. I didn't say anything. That was her. That was her that said it. I just said, sometimes I see it. And there's one person that's not your husband, because who will remain nameless.
Your husband, but there's one person that's not your husband.
No, there's one person that's not your husband who is eyes closed, mouth open, asleep a lot of times during the sermon. So, we'll see. He hadn't snored yet, but it's a.
Considering how everybody talks about how bright the lights are when you get up there,
Mhm.
I just assumed you couldn't see.
Oh no, I can see.
Oh, that's good to know.
I can see.
Good to know.
I can see.
Noted.
There's all those gestures that y'all are making and all the. Oh no, that's not right. I can see it. I can see it.
I'm gonna move the back of the congregation.
Oh goodness. Okay, so we decided that we're going to spend several weeks talking about the minor prophets, and so we are going to jump into that today, and hopefully, at least maybe halfway through class, or maybe I don't know at what point we'll start talking about the first one. But I did want to give a little bit of background information just to make sure we're on the same page about these guys, and also offer, if you got some questions here on the front end as we're even just talking about these prophets and kind of setting the stage for studying them. If there's some questions that you have in mind that you want to make sure that, we either, if we can answer it today, we can, or we may say, that's a really good question, let me look that up, and we'll get to it. So, first of all, just to think about the concept of prophets in Scripture. I mean, what do we think of when we think of prophets? Anybody? Fortune tellers, right? They're going to tell the future. They're prophesying something that's going to happen, right? And in that where most of our minds go, for the most part. I mean, if we talk about somebody nowadays, oh, he's a prophet. Well, that means they can, predict the future somehow.
Can it also be just a preacher?
Yes. So that's what I want to kind of clarify is that even though there is, I guess, a certain level of future telling to almost all the prophets, they're talking about, most of them are going to talk about something that's going to happen. It's not all fortune telling. It's not all future telling. Some of it is looking back at the past. Some of it is, okay, here's the state of things right now. and here's how God feels about it. And so we need to think of these, the more common Hebrew word in the Old Testament when a person is referred to as a prophet. That word is nabi, which means called or called out. Nabi would be our English letters. A nabi would be a prophet, and it's not even. I mean, you can even tell if it's a word that means to be called. It's not even about. There's nothing that has to do with fortune telling or future telling in that word. It's someone who has been called out by God for a specific purpose, and in general, to deliver a specific message. God has a message for His people, and He has called this person out and said, "I want you to deliver this message." And you can see that in a couple of instances, actually in Scripture. Brandon's talking about has been talking about some of the prophets with the teenager. We were talking the other day about Isaiah. And if you go to Isaiah chapter 6, now Isaiah is not a minor prophet. I'm just giving an example here. Isaiah chapter 6, he has this vision. He sees God. And in the process of that vision, God asks a question, who can I send? And Isaiah basically raises his hand like, here am I, send me. And he calls him out to go deliver this message. He's like, I'm going to give you messages to deliver to my people. The next book over is Jeremiah. And Jeremiah's call is described there in chapter 1, where Jeremiah is just living life. He's probably going to be a priest. He's kind of on that track. And then God comes to him and says, before you were born, I knew that you're going to be a prophet. I was calling you out to deliver messages. And Jeremiah's like, no, thank you. And that's Marshall's paraphrase. But that's basically what he says to him. God, I don't want to do that. And I'm too young. I'm too inexperienced. That's not what I want to do. And God's like, don't say no. I have a job for you. And he says, you're going to be a messenger. You're going to deliver these messages. But then he even tells them ahead of time, you're going to deliver messages that are really hard to hear. And people are going to like it. And people are going to like you. And not only that, but once you deliver these messages, they're not going to do what I'm asking them to do. So here's a job that's pretty much pointless. Is not going to produce anything. Go forth, That's kind of Jeremiah's call. But you see what I'm saying? Where, all these guys, even if they don't have a story that we see in Scripture, how they got their calling, there's the reason that we set them apart as prophets is it's a message that God has given them to go to deliver to a certain group of people for a certain reason. Does that make sense? Sometimes it's talking about the future. Sometimes it's putting a spotlight on some things of the past. A lot of times it's putting a spotlight on things that are happening right then and saying, these things need to change. So that's what we need to think of when we think of these prophets. Now, also, just to kind of clarify terminology a little bit, the group of prophets that we're going to be talking about, we normally refer to as the minor prophets. And if you think of major prophets and minor prophets, just what do you naturally think of, the difference between the two? We got major prophets and minor, huh?
Greater and lesser.
Right. These guys are more important. These guys, they're prophets, but they're kind of the B team. They're coming off the bench, and other sports analogies. They're just, huh? Yeah. The game is already decided. We're going to put the guy in.
My coach would put a player in with a minute left in the game. And you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's on me now.
The one that has no talent, like, bless your heart, you're going to get your 30 seconds out there. Yeah. And that's kind of the concept that we have. And it's not, so I want to be clear on that. The impact of the message is not different. The reason, and God doesn't call them minor prophets or major prophets. That's our terminology. And it really has to do with the length of the book themselves. Like Isaiah has, 60-something chapters, I think. Jeremiah has 40-something. Ezekiel has 40-ish. So Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, and they throw Lamentations in there, even though Lamentations is written by Jeremiah. So it's kind of like Jeremiah A. But those are the 5 books that we refer to as major prophets. Okay, and then the other 12 are the minor prophets. just because it's shorter, for the most part, it's shorter books. Several of them are only like 3 chapters. Obadiah is 1 chapter. They're just not as long. So somebody at some point started referring to them as the minor prophets, just because of the length, not because of the impact of the message.
It's not based on their message
Mm-mm.
at all.
No, we just have more material for some of these other guys, and again, that's our terminology. I don't know any other like.
Well, I had just never heard that before.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot of people that think, oh, this is just kind of a side note, or a footnote to some of these other prophecies, and like, no, these are very important messages. We just don't have as much content for these guys as we do Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel. So I don't know who decided to start calling them that. That had to have been a long time ago. And then the other thing, just to avoid some confusion, when we start doing this, we're not going to go through these in order of the table of contents. Okay? So if you learned the 39 books of the Old Testament, or if you look on your table of contents in your Bible or in your Bible app, the prophets are not in chronological order. And I don't know if you ever knew that. Probably most of you did. But just so you know, like, the first guy that we're going to talk about is Amos. And he's not the first prophet that's listed. Okay? He's actually 3 down the road. Huh?
And it just stinks that in your Bible you have to like piecemeal. Well, this guy was actually first, but we'll just kind of rearrange.
Yeah.
Fix it.
Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, there's theories as to why. But I don't know why they're arranged in the order that they are. Matter of fact, I was trying to look that up before this class, and there's 2 or 3 different theories, and none of them are great. Nobody really knows for sure. It may have been, honestly, it may have been just when the printing press was first invented and they started putting books of the Bible together. That's just the order that they chose to put them in, without any rhyme or reason.
Dates is when it happened.
Do what now?
They happened at different dates. is what
Yes.
I'm saying.
Yes. So,
Hundreds of years.
Yeah. that's-
yeah.
Okay, and back to your major and minor.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me. But, like, Hosea is a minor prophet, right?
Right.
He has more chapters than Daniel.
I know.
Well, that's not fair.
I know. I think. Yeah. For those who didn't hear that online, Hosea, who is a minor prophet, has more chapters than Daniel, who is a major prophet. I don't know why they got called. I don't know why they got put in the categories that they did. I wasn't there when that decision was made.
That's too bad.
And maybe it is part, like, Daniel's got more stories, because it's the lion's den, it's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's all the stuff that in Daniel that correlates with or doesn't with Revelation. So maybe that's why there's just, I don't know. I don't know why. Who knows why those different titles were chosen? Yes, ma'am.
I can't help but think of a major and minor about music. And major music in major writing is strong and usually happy and healthy
Uh-huh.
and strong.
Yeah.
And minor is like sad and I'm sorry, that has nothing to do with
No, but it's the same kind of thing.
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah, major notes and minor notes and stuff in music. I mean, when you major in college, that's your big focus. Then you minor in something else. It's important, but not as important. But that's not, and I want to kind of get that concept out of our minds as far as just the importance of these messages is very important. It has as much weight, I think, it should carry as much weight as reading through Isaiah or some of these other guys. There's just not as much content. That's the biggest reason, and I know there's more chapters in one than the other, but that's the biggest reason that people. I don't know when that started. I don't know if it's a couple of 100 years ago, or even longer than that. I'm not sure, because even if you go back to Jesus' day, they didn't have this, broken up into. Some of the scrolls were in chronological order, but really, if you went to the synagogue, they'd be like, well, bring up the scroll of Joel, and they would bring that up and start reading from it. And it was just a big container or shelf with a whole bunch of scrolls, and you just pick one. So it has to do with when we started arranging these in the Bible themselves, but I don't know why that particular terminology, or the order was chosen. So, for whatever that's worth.
Talk about it next time, please.
Okay, we'll spend time in class next time. That's right. Yeah, so I just let you know when we are going through this, it'll feel like we're hopping around a little bit with the books that we're looking at, but we're going to go through them in what most scholars believe are chronological order, based on either when they say this is who is reigning in Israel or Judah when I was prophesying, or because of some of the things that they talk about, you can kind of tell, okay, this is what was happening in Israel's history. Okay, now that brings me to a little bit. I'm not going to go real deep into it, just kind of real surface level, unless you want to go deeper, into a little bit of the history of these prophets, because I think it's important, and we'll do this more every time we talk about a new prophet. We're going to kind of paint a picture of what's happening in Israel or Judah's history at that moment. Okay, so I'm not going to do that a whole lot today, but just kind of give us an overview of this whole thing. Brandon, I don't even know what button to push to get different maps to come out. But Brandon drew a map. Let's just look at that, because we have some maps on here, but we'll wait on that. So, if you can imagine this, and it's a pretty good map that Brandon drew there. Did you put something up on the screen and then trace over it, or did you just draw it? Wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay.
I was looking at a map right next to it.
Yeah. Okay. So you got Israel and Judah, and over on the left, that would be the Mediterranean Sea. Down here where he's darkened in, this is the Dead Sea. Up north would be the Sea of Galilee, and the Jordan River running between the two. Okay. So, if we go back to 1 Samuel, first king of Israel, anybody remember his name? Starts with an S, ends in all. Saul, very good. Okay. Saul was first king of Israel. And, things didn't go great for him. Had some success, but kind of went off the tracks eventually. And so the guy that followed him was David. Very good. Okay. And King David is kind of the pinnacle, I guess, of kings of Israel. Everybody else is kind of compared to him from him forward. And so this, for the most part, is what the boundaries of Israel and Judah look like through most of the Old Testament. However, David was so successful at fighting battles and stuff, and if you look on your Bible maps, he extended the kingdom south all the way to basically, where the Sinai Peninsula was, where the Israelites wandered around the wilderness when they first came out of Egypt. That became even part of Israel's territory, and much further north than what we see here. And then Solomon came to power after David. That was his son Solomon. And even without battles and stuff, just tribute and just sheer power made the borders even bigger. They came further east, took over almost the whole coastline, and then went all the way up, and we don't have it written on here, but if you look in your Bible maps, to the Euphrates River, which is a huge area of land to the east of what is now modern-day Turkey. So the kingdom of Israel, by the time Solomon dies, is a pretty significant nation and pretty significant power in the world at that time, in the Mediterranean world at least. Okay? Now, in case you forgot, things fall apart after Solomon dies. His son Rehoboam comes to the throne. This is in 1 Kings chapters 11 and 12. It's also in 2 Chronicles chapter 10. But Rehoboam comes to the throne, and the people come to him and say, hey, things were hard under Solomon, and we want you to make things easier for us. And he says, come back in a few days, I'll give you an answer. And he has one group of advisors that says you need to listen to him, make things easier. And he has another group of advisors that are closer to his age, and they say, tell him you're actually going to make it harder. You need to show your power and your authority. You're actually going to make things worse for him, which seems like really dumb advice, but that's the one that he went with. So he comes back to the people and says, I'm going to make things harder on you. And so the people are like, well, done. And they rebel against him. They're led by a guy whose name is Jeroboam. That gets confusing because they're very similar sounding names, Jeroboam and Rehoboam, but two different people, not related to each other at all. But Rehoboam is the son of Solomon, and almost the entire nation rebels against him. But Judah, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, stick with Rehoboam, and the other 10 tribes rebel against him. And so that's when you now have two kingdoms. The southern kingdom, even though Benjamin is part of it, is just called Judah, and the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay? And that happens around 930-ish BC. Okay? So, then you read through the rest of 1st and 2nd Kings and 2nd Chronicles, and you kind of get just these snapshots of these different kings as they reigned over the years. Prophets that you read about during that time would be Elijah, Elisha, Micaiah, some people like that. So, and none of them have anything written down, as far as we know. They're just stories about them you find in 1st, 2nd Kings and in Chronicles. All right. Any questions so far? I know I'm going through kind of quick. Okay. So, fast forward, I don't know, a couple of 100 years, and the kingdom is still divided, and it's not nearly, neither kingdom is nearly as big as they used to be. Okay. And we had a map up here. If you can,
Press
tell
the
me which
left-
button you push.
The left button.
That's the right.
There you go. Is that-
that'll work.
That's okay?
Okay. Can y'all see that?
It's very small.
It's kind of okay. So here's Israel. Here's Judah. By the time we get to the minor prophets, oh wait, forgot a very important part. I'm probably not on camera anymore, but that's okay. When Jeroboam becomes king, everybody was still worshiping God. The temple was in the city of Jerusalem. This is where everybody was going to worship, and they divide the kingdom between Judah and Israel. But the people in Israel were still coming to the temple to offer their sacrifices and to worship. So Jeroboam starts to worry. What's his worry? Yeah. Or people would be like, what are we doing rebelling? Let's just go back to the way things were. So if they keep coming back to the capital city, they're going to decide not to be rebellious and not to, to basically give their allegiance back to Rehoboam, because this is where everybody's coming to worship. So Jeroboam decides, well, I'll set up places of worship here in Israel, except that he doesn't set up places to worship God. He sets up 2 idols, golden calves specifically, and he puts one in Bethel, which is right here, and one in Dan, which is up here. And those are the 2, at the time, northernmost and southernmost cities in his kingdom. And that's where he sets up those 2 idols, so that everybody in his kingdom, if you're closer to the north, go to Dan. If you're closer to the south, go to Bethel. But you go there to worship. And he tells people, these are your guys that brought you out of Egypt, and these are the guys that have been with you this whole time, which is just dumb, but people buy into it. And so Jeroboam, one of his first acts as king is to take people away from God. Okay? And for the next however many 100 years, every king in Israel basically follows suit. They never go back to fully worshiping God anymore. There's always idol worship. And then we got these other nations over here on the east side is the Ammonites, and then you got the Moabites. They're down here by the Dead Sea, and then the Edomites are down here on the southern part of the Dead Sea. Now these folks have always been kind of thorns in the side of Israel, but David and Solomon had completely conquered these nations, and they were subject to Israel. But as history moved forward, as time moved on, and as both Israel and Judah, I'm not even sure you can hear me online. I forgot I was supposed to be talking to the microphone. Okay, as both Israel and Judah struggle with their allegiance to God, these nations would become powerful, and there's constant battle. And Israel loses. I know right now it's over here, but eventually, by the time we get to the minor prophets, Judah doesn't have any control over this area anymore. It's really limited to what we see right here. And Israel has less and less power on this side of the Jordan River. And everything's kind of shrinking, and they're not nearly as powerful as they used to be. Everybody with me? Okay. Now, we get to the first minor prophet that we want to talk about, and his name is Amos. Okay? So that's the first guy that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to confuse y'all even more here in just a second, because I'm going to tell you about who was king when Amos was prophesying. So, if you want to, we'll get into a little bit today, and then we'll talk more about Amos in a little bit greater detail next week. So Amos is prophesying at about, hold on, let me check my notes, around 760 BC. So you're looking at 200 years after the two kingdoms had divided. Okay? So a lot has happened. The whole, the story of Ahab and Jezebel, Elijah and the fire from heaven, all those things have already come and gone. We're much further down the road than that, just so everybody knows. Okay, this isn't like a few months later. This is 200 years later when Amos comes on the scene. Now, the guy that is reigning at the time, let's see, who would be reigning? A guy named Amaziah is reigning in Judah, and Amaziah, he started out having some military success. His father was pretty successful militarily, and then he won a few battles on the front end, and then things kind of fell apart for him because he was an evil king that turned people away from worshiping God, and so bad things started happening. So that's who's reigning when Amos prophesies or starts his prophecy. That's probably who's reigning in Judah. The bigger thing is the king who is in Israel, whose name is Jeroboam. This is where we get confused, okay? So, completely different Jeroboam than the first king that Israel had when the kingdom's divided. So, we got Jeroboam, if you want to call him Jeroboam the first or Jeroboam I, that split the kingdom and then started the idol worship. 200 years later, another Jeroboam. No relation, okay? He's not a distant descendant. Not great-great-great-great-grandchild or anything like that. Completely unrelated, but I guess the parents liked the name, so they named him Jeroboam. Okay? Yeah. So it's Jeroboam. Everybody calls him Jeroboam the second or Jeroboam II, whatever you want to call him. But he starts reigning, and he was one of the guys that reigned the longest once the kingdoms were split. Matter of fact, he reigned a year longer than either David or Solomon did too, for whatever that's worth. But there's not a whole lot if you read through either Kings or Chronicles. You don't get a whole lot of description of his reign, and a lot of what we know about Jeroboam, at least as far as like the kingdom of Israel and the military success they had, the economic success they had, comes from outside sources. Because there's not that much in Scripture about it, okay? But he reigned for 41 years and kind of took over some territory that Israel had lost. He had a strong military presence, and so he was taking over cities that other countries had taken from him, kind of going all the way up, let's see, well, what would be up to the top of this picture? Even further north than that. It was a time of wealth. It was a time of power. It was a time of prosperity in Israel, even though Israel was still worshiping other gods. It was something that God, I don't know, maybe he thought, if I allow them to prosper, maybe they'll thank me for it and turn their hearts to me. I don't know exactly what was going on there. But we do know, and we'll talk about this in a few weeks and talk about him. We're going to talk about Jonah. Jonah and Amos prophesied pretty close at the same time. Jonah is mentioned, I had it written down, but not in these notes. Anyway, he's mentioned in 2 Kings as actually prophesying that Jeroboam II was going to have all this success. And it does say, in 2 Kings chapter 14, I'm totally paraphrasing, but in verses 26 and 27 of 2 Kings chapter 14, Talks about how God still loved Israel. God didn't want them to suffer. God still wanted good things for them. And he was trying to use Jeroboam in his time as king to have some safety, have some peace, have some success again, because that was still his people. And for 200 years, they've worshipped other gods. They've not just followed these golden calves. They've followed Baal and Ashtoreth and all these different things, and God still cared about them. And okay, so side note, a lot of times we look at the God of the Old Testament as just about vengeance and punishment and rules. The God of the Old Testament is as much a God of grace as the one that we see in the New Testament with Jesus. 200 years of his people going, we don't want you. We want to follow someone else. And God is still going, but I want good things for you. And I'm going to allow you to have success. I'm going to allow you to have prosperity. I'm going to allow things to go good for you. I'm going to bless you. Hoping that love and that appreciation would be reciprocated. And it wasn't. Okay? Enter a guy named Amos. All right. Now, any questions so far?
The thing about Israel is kind of like us today in America.
Mm-hmm.
Like our culture, whenever it comes to like morality and stuff, is not fantastic.
Yeah.
And yet God is still with us. And
Yeah.
He still blesses us. And he still blesses people that are immoral.
Yeah.
But there's an opportunity, I guess.
Yeah. You can see a lot of and we'll see some similarities between our culture nowadays and the culture of the people that Amos was talking to, because of we for all the things we have to complain about. Everybody's hearing the recorders. Speaking of things to complain about, the recorders are going. We're pretty prosperous. We've got a lot of blessings. Things are going really good for us. And how much do we, give God credit for that, or how much is our country going towards God or walking away from Him in spite of all the blessings He's given us? What were you going to add?
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting that in history, you said that this went on for 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
The Roman Empire and other great empires throughout history have lasted about 200 years.
Yeah, it seems 200 years seems to be kind of the things the wheels start falling off after about 200 years.
I kind of get a little nervous thinking about how long is the United States?
Yeah, we're a little over 200,
We're a
but
little over 200.
yeah. What were you going to ask?
Were they thanking those other gods for the prosperity, or
Sure.
not think in their head, hey, it's not these gods, or
No,
the gods were giving them that prosperity?
Yes, absolutely. The question being, as they're worshiping these other gods, were they thanking them for the things they're receiving? They absolutely were. One of the gods that they worshipped was the god Baal, which is a fertility god. Okay, and that applies to everything: fertile crops, fertile livestock, fertile wives producing children. It was like if things are prosperous, that was because Baal was prospering you, and so you would offer sacrifices to Baal, in all these different ways, including, and this is one of the things that God addresses so often, and it's just bizarre to us, but it was common back then, was for people to go to either, a certain temple or even up at these designated places on the side of the hill or side of a mountain and have sex with these prostitutes as a way to worship Baal. And if they appeased Baal in that way and gave them some of their crops and different things too, then Baal would provide the rain and would provide the sun, would provide more growth for their crops and allow their animals to survive the winters and be stronger. And, that was just, again, we look at that and go, that's just dumb. But for whatever reason, they bought into it and it made sense to them. That's just one. There were other guys. I mean, there's guys that you wanted, I guess, power from and wealth from, that would, is it Molech or Chemosh? I can't remember which one. That would command people to take their infants, their firstborn children, and sacrifice them in the fire as a form of worship. And we just look at that and go, what? But that's what they would do. So 200 years of just dabbling or fully giving themselves to these different gods, and they've got kings, queens, prophets who are saying, this is the guy that you should worship, and this is what will happen if you do. And the whole time, Jehovah God is going, it's me. I'm the one that's providing this. I'm the one that has given you peace. I'm the one that brought you out of slavery hundreds of years ago in the first place. It's me. And this is why he sends somebody like Amos to Israel. Okay? And the things that Amos talks about that we'll get into, I mean, he comes at a time when things are good. And he has kind of negative message. So, if you're having a good day, and things are going pretty good at work or with your friends, or you just have one of those days where everything's just clicking. I'm having a good day today. And then somebody comes along and says something negative or critical. What does that do to your day? It's a downer. Do you pay attention to them? Sometimes, right? Or, sometimes, especially if somebody's criticizing something, like, well, they don't know me. I ain't paying attention to that. Even if they're right, we try to dismiss it. Or we get mad at them. How dare you? That's the reaction that a lot of these prophets get. And that's what happens for sure with Amos. Okay?
Marshall,
Yes, ma'am.
I used to think these people had come from a nation had come from ancestors to whom God directly spoke and said, do this, don't do this. And yet they still, But then as I got older, I realized we came from ancestors, those same ancestors, many of us, and we have it all written out for us. So maybe we don't need to be quite as critical
Oh, for sure.
of the Jewish people
For sure.
as I used to be.
Yeah, no.
I used to think, how could they do that? God has done so much for them. And then you stop and think, well, God's done quite a bit for me too.
Yeah, it's easy for us to look at them and go, yeah, they're so dumb. Like, how could y'all do that? But yeah, I still remember, let's see, my sophomore year, I think, at Harding University, I was taking a class on the books of, it's like a chunk of the Old Testament, it's like Joshua through Esther, But we're going through the book of Judges, which is one of my favorite books. And, I've shared with you guys before, the whole theme of the book of Judges is everybody's worshiping God. Then they start worshiping other gods. And then God allows some nation to take over. And then they feel bad and they repent and they say, God, we're sorry. We'll be loyal to you from now on. And he sends a judge to rescue them. And they worship God for a little while. And then they start worshiping other gods. And then God allows a nation to take them over. And then they feel sorry. And they say, God, we'll worship you from now on. And then he sends a judge to rescue them. And then they worship God for a little while. And then they start worshiping other gods. And it's the same cycle through that whole book. And we were talking about it in class. And the way that God rescued his people in some of those stories, I mean, just the supernatural things he did to rescue his people. And I'm looking at that. And, I just raised my hand in class one day and just like, how do they walk away? Like, they just saw God rain down hailstones and kill an army with hailstones. Like, how would you not go, I'm worshiping that guy from now on? Of course you would, right? And there's just so many things. And I was like, I just don't get it. And my professor, I remember Dr. Fortner, I remember him looking at me and going, Mr. Brown, do we not do the same thing today? And started talking, just naming off just different blessings that God gives us. And how often do we go chasing after something else? And I was like, yeah, but it wasn't hailstones, But yeah, that's we want to criticize, but we recognize, and that's what we'll recognize in a lot of these prophets. There's something still that resonates with us and where our hearts are and what some of our actions are that are very similar to people who lived 2,700 years ago. Okay? Yes. I thought somebody was going to ask a question. Okay, so Amos comes on the scene. I'll tell you a little bit about his history, and then we'll talk more about his message next week. Okay, but if you look in chapter 1, Amos chapter 1, verse 1, the words of Amos, one of the shepherds of Tekoa, and what he saw concerning Israel 2 years before the earthquake, when Uzziah was king of Judah and Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, was king of Israel. Okay? I don't know what earthquake specifically that was, but people back in that time would have known, oh, the earthquake. Okay, that one earthquake. I guess maybe it's significant. Now, where does he say that Amos is from? Tekoa. Okay? He's from a city called Tekoa. And what was his job? He was a shepherd. All right, so a couple things that we know about Amos. First of all, was he a professional, shall we say, a clergyman before he started? No, he's a shepherd. Okay, he watches sheep. Much more, he wasn't an urbanite. He was from out in the country. Okay, he was kind of, some people might say, he's, I don't know, what we call him, a redneck or a hick or something. He's a country bumpkin kind of guy. And he's also from Tekoa. Now, does anybody? I don't think it's even on this thing. Does anybody? It's not on here. But guess which country Tekoa is in? You got two choices. Guess which one? Judah. Tekoa is in Judah, but he's going to go prophesy where? In Israel. Okay. So just so we know ahead of time, we got a guy from down here going up here to tell these people the things that they're doing wrong. And he's going to go to the capital city at the time, which is Samaria, which is up here. And that's where he's going to do a lot of his preaching.
It'd be like a prophet coming from Mexico, coming out to New York City and saying, look at all this wealth. You guys stink.
Yeah.
And here's the reasons why. But it's from God.
And not only that, he's not coming from a position of wealth himself. He's coming from not necessarily impoverished, but he's not upper elite, upper echelon society. You know what I'm saying? He's just this country rube that's coming to the big city and telling wealthy people, hey, God's not happy with you. So, how do you think that's going to go? It's not going to be well received, right? Okay.
Tekoa was south of Bethlehem.
Okay. So Bethlehem's right here.
Yeah.
So be right
So
here.
south of
Here's the capital city of Jerusalem. So south, yeah, about that area right there. Okay? And he's going to go up to Samaria.
And wasn't David from Bethlehem?
David was from Bethlehem, for sure, originally. Yeah, he comes from an area where that's what you do. Matter of fact, there's a good possibility that his ancestors and David's ancestors at least knew each other. Not that they were related, but, same kind of lifestyle. So I'll tell you this, and then we'll wrap up this morning. The big problem, and you could go through Amos and go, okay, he's addressing this, and addressing this, and addressing this. Look at chapter 2, if you got your Bibles open to Amos. Chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. For me, personally, this is kind of, if you want to look through the book of Amos and go, okay, what all is he addressing? This is kind of a snapshot of all the things that you can find him addressing in his messages. Talking about the people of Israel, he says, they sell the innocent for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. They trample on the heads of the poor as on the dust of the ground, and they deny justice to the oppressed. Father and son use the same girl and so profane my holy name. They lie down beside every altar on garments taken in pledge. In the house of their God, they drink wine taken as fines. Now, he's going to get more specific at different places, but that's kind of a summation of all the different things that Amos is going to address. Okay, so I can kind of reword it for you this way. I'll give you this list, and then we will call it quits for today. Big issues that God is addressing with Israel through Amos. Number one of the big issues, he addresses this often. They are taking advantage, the rich people especially, are taking advantage of less fortunate people. The people who don't have the same ability, the same wealth, they're denied rights, they're denied justice. It's the stronger getting stronger, the weaker getting weaker, and the stronger taking advantage of the weaker in the process. All right? Number two, they were dishonest. they're taking bribes. It's dishonest scales that they use in the marketplaces. They're just dishonest people. Number 3, I'll just sum it up in this way. They're doing ungodly things. He mentions specifically, father and son having the same woman. That's something that God never wanted. He specifically even addressed it in his law, not to do that. And so they're taking things that God says, I don't want this to be part of your character, and they're doing those things. Okay? And then they're worshiping other gods. They're still bowing down to other idols. They're still sacrificing to other gods. And those are the 4 main things that Amos is going to address in different ways through his letter. Okay? And we're not going to go chapter by chapter and go all the way through Amos. We're just going to kind of pick some snapshots of some snippets of what Amos has to say. Yeah, absolutely. This is coming from Amos 2, 6 through 8. They took advantage of less fortunate people. They were dishonest. Everybody ready? They did ungodly things. And what I mean by that is things that were directly forbidden by God. Please don't do this. That's what they were doing. Okay? And then they were worshiping other gods. They weren't true to the God of Israel.
Well, that wouldn't go over too well when he came to town.
No. Well, and that's the thing. With it's kind of a common thing with all these prophets. None of us, I shouldn't say none of us, but I would assume none of us. Definitely not. I don't like criticism. I don't like people pointing out my flaws and my faults. I don't know any of us that do. I don't know any of us like, please criticize me. Tell me everything that's wrong with me. But sometimes we need somebody to be honest with us. If it's a blind spot for us, if there's something we're doing and maybe even we're not realizing it, or we know it, but we're not even paying attention to the kind of damage that it's causing, we need somebody to call us on the carpet on that, right? That's what God is doing. Through most of these prophets, it's definitely what he's using Amos for. It's just basically holding up a mirror in front of Israel and going, look at yourselves. Look at what you're doing. Look at who you've become. And nobody likes to hear that. Even if it's right, even if it's accurate, we all tend to, balk at criticism, right?
And God's people would kill these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not for me.
I don't like that message. Dead, Yeah, well, Amos, we'll talk about it, but Amos gets tattled on. Honestly, there's a guy that goes and tells on him to the king. He's like, King, Amos is out here saying mean things. So he gets told on, and he still keeps preaching anyway. And that's one of the things that is amazing about all these guys. Most of the messages that they give would have been really hard to hear and would not have been well received, and they did it anyway. And so, yeah, that's who we're called to be as well. So we'll put a pause there on Amos, and we'll finish up talking about him next week. Okay? Any final thoughts, questions? I know. Yeah. Whatever it was, that was not it. Whatever it was supposed to be, that was not it.